Female snipers were branded as a risk in combat. They supposedly lacked the stamina for the grind and couldn't land shots when it mattered most. That was the judgment Colonel James Rourke had written in his review 3 years back, denying her bid to join their advanced training course. Sergeant First Class Blake Hensley pressed her eye against a loopholed Mark VI scope, staring at that same officer's unit trapped 1,047 meters away, their unanswered SOS calls echoing for 40 long minutes, because the lone sniper in range was the liability he'd written off. The Hindu Kush stretched vast under a starless Afghan sky, the darkness so total even night optics fought to cut through it. Before we dive deeper into the night that rewrote everything, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. Veterans and their families always add the best insight to tales like this, so hit subscribe if this strikes you. Just months out of service, Sergeant First Class Blake Hensley lay flat on a ridge at 11,000 feet. Her custom Remington 700-based bolt rifle in 338 Lapua Magnum locked steady against her shoulder. 31 years old, raised in the Montana high country by her grandmother, a former Women's Army Corps marksman in Korea, Blake had inherited more than a steady grip. She had left the Army 2 months earlier, after 12 years in uniform. Yet here she was back in the Hindu Kush as a private contractor, watching over a CIA safehouse exfil. Everything on the comms was routine until 2323 local, when the emergency net erupted with a sound that froze her chest cold. A SEAL team's distress beacon, their voices raw, begging for immediate fire cover. No one answered. The quick reaction force was at least 40 minutes away. Air support was stuck on the ground at Kandahar, grounded by weather. Blake had first learned to shoot on her family's ranch near Helena, Montana, where her grandmother Margaret taught her that true precision came from breath, not brute strength. Margaret Hensley had been one of just 12 women trained as snipers in the overlooked Korean War program, though the files stayed sealed until 1995. She had passed down her father's custom rifle, and something deeper, the truth that the finest marksmen weren't always the strongest or largest. That lesson shaped the Army's choice to recruit Blake from the University of Montana's physics program after she won 3 back-to-back national long-range championships. She went on to graduate the United States Army Sniper Course at Fort Benning as the Distinguished Honor Graduate, one of only 4 women who managed to finish that year. Her instructors highlighted her rare skill in calculating windage and elevation shifts without devices, sharpened through years of reading Montana's unpredictable winds. But her true schooling came in Afghanistan's Sangin Valley in 2019, attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment. During a 6-day mission, she neutralized 17 confirmed threats at distances beyond 1,200 meters, holding off enemy fire until reinforcements reached a stranded platoon. The Rangers began calling her Avenger after she took out an enemy sniper who had killed 2 of their men. A brutal 1,623-meter shot through shifting crosswinds that most manuals marked as nearly impossible. Even with that record, traditional special operations doors stayed locked. Too many leaders clung to what Colonel James Rourke had once written, that women couldn't endure the strain or deliver under Tier 1 pressure. Meanwhile, the cries over the emergency net were growing more urgent. Blake caught the call signs: SEAL Team 9, Trident 4-2, the very unit whose commander, Colonel James Rourke, had turned down her request 3 years earlier with a formal evaluation that circulated across selection boards. In it, he claimed women lacked the strength for extended stalks, the coldness for critical shots, and the stamina for operations lasting days. That memo became part of the institutional wall keeping qualified women out of key roles. She remembered sitting in the brigade commander's office, staring at Rourke's words while her own commendation sat untouched on the desk. 17 confirmed kills, 3 Bronze Stars, a Distinguished Service Cross. None of it outweighed his theoretical arguments. Now his voice came crackling in her ear, calling frantically for supporting fire. His men were stuck in a tight valley, hammered from higher ground. 2 operators were already bleeding. Their sniper was gone. Mortars had their grid locked in, trapping them while fighters closed to finish the job. Blake flipped to the emergency channel and gave her identification. Contractor Overwatch Alpha on Ridge 77, eyes on your grid. Rourke's voice hesitated as he heard the call sign. He recognized her immediately. After a pause, his deputy spoke up on the radio, relaying their coordinates and enemy firing points. Blake pulled ranges with her Kestrel 5700 ballistic meter. The wind tore from the northwest at 18 to 25 knots, a full-value crosswind across her line. The temperature had plunged to minus 12 Celsius, altering the ballistic coefficients. These shots would be right at the limit of the cartridge's effective range, the kind of extreme, long-range marksmanship Colonel James Rourke had always claimed was beyond her. Blake's hands, however, remained calm and steady as she built her range card. Her thoughts flickered back to that meeting 3 years earlier. Rourke hadn't looked at her, only through her, insisting that combat shooting demanded a ruthless instinct women supposedly lacked. He'd never been in the Sangan Valley watching her hold a sector for 18 straight hours, making shot after shot while incoming rounds struck within inches of her hide. Her grandmother's words returned to her mind. Pride blinds men. Blake, when they can't see you coming, that's when you're most dangerous. Margaret had endured Korea by staying unseen, pulling off shots the men had said were impossible, saving entire units that never realized their protector had been a woman. The irony was sharp. Rourke's team now needed the very liability he'd once cast aside. Part of her wondered what would happen if she stayed silent. Let the quick reaction force handle things in 40 minutes. But then, she caught a sound that changed everything. A young voice, no older than 22, breaking over the net, crying for his mother before his leader cut him off. That boy hadn't written the evaluation. Neither had the wounded men bleeding out in that valley. They were sons, brothers, husbands. Her resentment toward Rourke couldn't override her duty to them. She settled her crosshairs on the first machine gun nest, the faint heat signature barely distinguishable through her thermal at 1 through 47 meters. The calculations flowed without thought. Elevation for distance and cold. Windage for the crosswind. Spindrift correction. Coriolis effect at this range. Blake's first shot cracked across the night, and the machine gun fell silent. Rourke's team confirmed the hit. Disbelief clear in their voices. Blake was already working the bolt, shifting her aim toward the next target. A mortar crew set at 1,562 meters. The wind had swung hard, gusting up to 28 knots. She held the left edge and pressed through her breath cycle. Another direct strike, but the enemy adapted fast. They'd spotted her muzzle flash and redirected fire onto her perch. Rounds cracked overhead as she shifted 20 meters to the right, tucking behind a new rock outcrop. The SEALs called out 3 more hostile positions, including a sniper already zeroed in on them. Blake spotted him first, a faint thermal mark at a cave entrance, 123 meters out. Well beyond the cartridge's comfortable limits, the wind was howling now, whipping between 25 and 35 knots, roughly 29 to 40 miles an hour. At that range, her round would take nearly 3 seconds in flight. She'd need to read his movements, predict the shift, and ride the canyon's wind currents. The hostile sniper fired, his round landing dangerously close to the SEALs. Blake watched his heat trace rock back as he cycled the bolt. She calculated her hold. 14 mils elevation, 6 mils for wind, plus angle compensation downslope. The math rolled like poetry, each adjustment flowing into the next. She squeezed off the shot, the seconds dragged unbearably. Then his thermal shape crumpled backward. Rourke's voice came over comms, calm and clipped despite it all. Enemy sniper down, request immediate suppression. Grit November, Charlie 47. Blake was already shifting, already computing. 4 more firing points left, 23 minutes until QRF would arrive, and her ammo nearly dry. 18 rounds against potentially dozens of targets. The fight was spiraling fast. Taliban reinforcements were slipping through covered routes, trying to flank the pinned SEALs. Blake tracked them through her thermal, but every trigger pull exposed her location, and the enemy's return fire grew sharper. Shards of rock stung her face as rounds slammed inches away. Then Rourke's voice broke in, urgent now. They're in the dead space, we can't reach them. Estimate 30 seconds before they're on top of us. The dead space, a fold in the ground hidden from the SEALs, but clear from Blake's elevated ridge. She counted 12 fighters moving fast through it, readying for an assault. At 700 meters, hitting moving targets in heavy gusts was considered almost impossible. At Benning, the sniper course called it theoretical shooting, beyond practical application. But Blake had learned in Montana what Benning never taught. She didn't resist the wind, she flowed with it. Margaret had taught her to read the patterns, to sense the breaks between gusts. Blake slipped into that rhythm, her grandfather's rifle merging with her own will. 12 shots in 90 seconds, each demanding instant math and flawless precision. The first fighter fell, then the second. By the 5th, they scattered, but she tracked them relentlessly in the thermal, leading them the way Margaret had taught her to lead pronghorn across open plains. 8 down, 9, 10. The final 2 scrambled into cover, but the attack was already broken. QRF helicopters crested the horizon, Apaches ripping into the remaining positions with cannon fire. Rourke's team was alive. The liability he had written off had saved every one of them. As dawn broke, evacuation birds set down in the valley. Blake watched through her scope, while Rourke's men carried their wounded aboard. She held her post another 6 hours, covering until they were clear. 23 confirmed strikes, 17 enemy dead, numbers that doctrine called extraordinary. 3 days later, Blake received an encrypted note through her contractor liaison. Colonel James Rourke had formally revised his old evaluation, admitting his bias had been built on theory instead of real evidence. He recommended her for a civilian commendation and even asked if she would consider training his sniper section. She turned down the training role but accepted something else, an invitation to the SEAL Team 9 reunion that December. Rourke greeted her at the entrance himself, his whole unit lined up behind him. The young operator who had once cried out for his mother was there, alive because of her shots. Rourke handed Blake a plaque, marking her as an honorary member of Trident 4-2, inscribed to the guardian angel who answered when no one else could. 6 months later, the Special Operations community quietly adjusted its selection criteria. Rourke testified before a review board, citing Blake's actions as proof that skill, not gender, should define qualification. Within a year, the first female candidates entered SEAL sniper training. Blake returned to Montana, where she now teaches military and law enforcement snipers on her family ranch. Above her desk hang Margaret's Korean War Medal and Rourke's plaque, a reminder that often the most formidable warriors are the ones no one expects to see coming.